The afternoon Genevieve showed up at Little Roots Daycare on Upper James Street. Maya was in the middle of cleaning a patient's back molars when her phone lit up with the center's number. She stepped away from the chair, snapped off one glove, and answered. "Ms. Maya?" It was Erin, the daycare coordinator. Her voice was careful in the way people get when they're trying not to alarm someone. "There's a woman here claiming to be Finn's grandmother. She says you sent her. I just wanted to confirm before." "Don't let her near him." Maya was already reaching for her jacket. "I'm on my way." She made the drive in 11 minutes, which wasn't possible on Upper James at 4 in the afternoon. But she did it anyway. Genevieve was standing near the front entrance with her arms crossed, wearing the kind of beige coat that cost more than Maya's monthly rent. She looked older than the last time Maya had seen her. There were new lines around her mouth, and her hair had gone fully silver at the temples. When she heard Maya's footsteps on the pavement, she turned, and for one moment, something flickered across her face that might have been shame. It didn't last. "Maya, I only wanted to. You told me the baby in my stomach belonged to someone else." Maya stopped a few feet away. Her voice was steady in a way she hadn't expected. "You said that to my face, you and Jasper together in your kitchen, and now you're standing in front of my son's daycare calling yourself his grandmother." Genevieve opened her mouth. "Go home," Maya said. She walked past her through the glass door and didn't look back. 18 months earlier, Maya had been the kind of person who still believed in giving people the benefit of the doubt. She'd grown up learning to do that. Her mother Helen had raised her alone in a semi-detached on Barton Street East, and the neighborhood had opinions about a single woman with a daughter and no husband in sight. Helen worked days at a medical supply company and 2 evenings a week at a grocery store, and she never let Maya see her cry about any of it. When the women at church said unkind things, Helen would come home, make a pot of lentil soup, and sit across the kitchen table from Maya and say, "You judge a person by what they do when things get hard, not by what they say when things are easy." Maya had carried that with her. Through high school in the East End, through dental hygiene college at Mohawk, through the years of building something small but solid for herself. She was 27 when she met Jasper at a friend's birthday dinner in Westdale. He was tall and a bit too serious until he laughed, and he laughed at the same things she did. They talked for 3 hours at the end of that table while everyone else drifted home, and by the time they stepped out into the November cold on King Street, she already knew something had shifted in her. They dated quietly for almost 2 years. Jasper came from a family with money. His mother Genevieve owned 4 rental properties across the lower city and managed them with a ferocious efficiency that left no room for sentiment. Jasper was her only son. His father had died when Jasper was in his early teens, and since then Genevieve had arranged her life around 2 things, her properties and her son. Maya understood this before they ever met. Jasper had described his mother in careful, affectionate terms that Maya recognized immediately as the language people use when they love someone complicated. She was nervous the first time he brought her to Ancaster. Genevieve's house was on a quiet crescent, large, well-maintained, every surface in it a deliberate statement about who lived there and what they were worth. She greeted Maya at the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes and a comment about how interesting it was that Maya had grown up on Barton Street. Not rude exactly, precise, like she was noting the weight of something on a scale. "Your mother raised you on her own?" Genevieve said over dinner, when Jasper had stepped away to get more water. "She did," Maya said. "That must have been hard for her, and for you." Maya looked at her. "We were fine." Genevieve smiled again. "Of course you were." Jasper came back, and the conversation moved on, and Maya sat through the rest of that meal telling herself that first impressions weren't everything. She had seen people surprise her before. She believed it was possible. She was wrong about Genevieve. It just took her time to understand exactly how wrong. They married the following spring in a small ceremony at the Botanical Gardens. 40 people, good food, the kind of afternoon that stays golden in photographs. Genevieve had expressed clear and specific preferences about the budget, the guest list, and the venue, and Jasper had pushed back until a version of the wedding that was acceptable to everyone emerged. What Maya had wanted most was for Helen to wear a dress she actually liked, and to cry happy tears in the front row, and she got that much. The rest she let go. They moved into a townhouse rental in the East End while they saved for something to buy. Genevieve was 20 minutes away, and treated that distance as roughly equivalent to being next door. She arrived with casseroles. She left comments about the neighborhood. She mentioned Clai. Clai had been Jasper's girlfriend for 3 years before she'd taken a job in Vancouver. She was back now, working in the project management office at the engineering firm where Jasper consulted. Genevieve spoke about her with a warmth she didn't bother to conceal. Clai is so good with budgets. Clai was asking after you, Jasper. Clai and I had lunch on Tuesday, and Maya understood exactly what those small, regular mentions were meant to accomplish. She didn't say much about it. She watched, and she waited, and she kept doing her work at the dental practice, and coming home and calling her mother every evening, and trying to be patient with the particular kind of cruelty that presents itself as nothing more than preference. She found out she was pregnant on a Thursday morning in October, 2 years into their marriage. She sat on the edge of the tub for a long time with the test in her hand, feeling something open up inside her chest she didn't have words for yet. When Jasper came home that evening, she told him in the kitchen, and he held her face in both hands and said her name quietly twice. And she could feel that he was happy. They agreed to wait until 12 weeks to tell Genevieve. They didn't make it that far. Genevieve overheard them talking on a Sunday afternoon when she'd let herself in through the back door. She had a spare key, which Maya had agreed to under pressure and regretted immediately, and she came to find them in the living room, wearing a look Maya hadn't seen before. "How far along?" she said. Jasper started to answer, and Genevieve turned to Maya. "I want to hear it from you." 10 weeks, Maya said. Genevieve nodded slowly. "And you're certain it's Jasper's?" The room went quiet in a particular way. "Mom," Jasper said. "I'm asking a reasonable question." Her voice was completely even. "You have a colleague you're close with. That man at your office. The dentist. His name was Ellis. He was 42 years old, had been married for 12 years, and had 2 daughters in primary school. He and Maya had worked at the same practice for 3 years, and were genuinely friends. They ate lunch together on Tuesdays when their schedules lined up, and he'd helped her navigate a difficult conversation with their office manager the previous spring. At Maya's promotion lunch in September, he'd touched her shoulder when he laughed at something she said. Genevieve had photographs. She produced them from her purse, printed, which felt deliberate, almost ceremonial, and laid them on the coffee table. Ellis leaning toward Maya across a restaurant table, his hand on her shoulder. Maya laughing in a way that looked, she supposed, like a lot of things if you'd already decided in advance what you wanted it to look like. "These were taken in September," Genevieve said. "At the point these were taken, you would have been approximately 3 weeks pregnant." "Mom, stop." Jasper's voice had gone tight. "I'm not making accusations, I'm simply asking her to explain." Maya looked at the photographs. She looked at Jasper. He was staring at the pictures on the table, and she watched something move through his face that she hadn't known was there. Not quite doubt. More like a door in him swinging open onto a room she'd never seen. She explained. She explained about Ellis, about the lunch, about what it was and what it wasn't. She was calm and clear and completely honest, the same way she had been honest her entire life. And when she finished, Genevieve looked at her with an expression of patient, immovable skepticism that told Maya everything she needed to know about how this was going to go. The argument with Jasper lasted 3 days. He never raised his hand to her. He didn't need to. He had his mother's voice and his mother's photographs, and a silence that grew heavier every hour. And when Genevieve came back on Wednesday evening and said quietly that it might be best if Maya stayed somewhere else while things were sorted out, Jasper was standing in the hallway, and he said nothing in her defense. Not one word. Maya packed 2 bags. Her hands didn't shake. She was saving that for the car. Helen opened the door before Maya had finished knocking. She took one look at her daughter's face and said, "Come inside," and that was all she said for a while. She made tea. She sat beside Maya on the couch that had been there since Maya was in middle school, and eventually Maya told her everything, and Helen held her hand and didn't say anything she could have said, because she wasn't that kind of woman. "What are you going to do?" Helen asked. "I don't know yet." Maya put her hand on her stomach. She was barely showing, "But I'm keeping the baby." Helen nodded once. "Then we'll figure out everything else." The divorce papers arrived 5 weeks later by courier. Maya's name was spelled correctly. Genevieve had probably proofread them herself. Maya sat at Helen's kitchen table with the documents for a long time, then called a family lawyer she'd found through a colleague, a woman named Sheila, direct and practical in the way Maya had come to appreciate in people. Sheila told her she had options. DNA testing could establish paternity. Support could be pursued through proper channels. The circumstances of her departure might be worth documenting. Maya listened carefully and thanked her and said she needed to think. In the end, she signed the papers. She told herself it was because fighting Genevieve would cost more than she had. Not just money, but hours, energy, the ordinary daily effort she needed to put toward building something instead of dismantling something else. She told herself she would revisit the support question once the baby was here. Privately, she wasn't sure she could bear Genevieve anywhere near her child. And legal proceedings had a way of making distance complicated. She signed and she moved forward, and she was angrier than she had ever been in her life. And she got up every morning and went to work, and came home to Helen's, and made dinner and rubbed lotion on her growing stomach and refused to fall apart. The baby came on a Tuesday in late April, 6 weeks after the divorce was finalized, 17 hours of labor. Helen held her hand the entire time. When they placed the boy on Maya's chest, she looked at his face, his round, insistent, furious little face, and everything she had been holding in for months came out at once, enormous and messy, and the nurse turned away quietly to give her a moment. She named him Finn. He looked exactly like Jasper. The first year passed the way first years with babies do, in a blur of feeding schedules and disrupted sleep and small milestones that felt, each one, like evidence of something larger. Maya went back to work at 4 months, her mother taking Finn 2 days a week, and little Roots taking him the other 3. Helen's MS had been quiet, but her good periods were never entirely predictable, and Maya had learned long ago to plan around uncertainty. Ellis had heard through the practice what had happened, and was horrified when she told him the full story. He apologized more than once. She told him there was nothing to apologize for. The photos were real. The people who chose to believe the worst had made that choice themselves, and none of that was his fault. But he helped anyway. He connected her with Sheila again, this time to pursue a formal child support claim once Finn was born. The DNA result was exactly what Maya had known it would be. Jasper didn't contest the claim. By the time the paperwork cleared, Maya suspected he already understood what it meant. She didn't ask him. She didn't want to know when he'd figured it out or what he'd thought when he did. She deposited the first payment into Finn's savings account, and that was the full extent of their relationship. Genevieve had no part in it. Genevieve did not know where Maya lived. What Maya did know, carried to her in fragments by mutual acquaintances she mostly tried not to think about, was that Jasper and Clai had married the previous autumn in a ceremony that was, by all accounts, considerably more elaborate than his first wedding had been. Genevieve had apparently been in an excellent mood all evening. She knew that Clai had become pregnant the following spring. She knew, from a patient who happened to be a neighbor of Genevieve's and mentioned it with genuine sorrow one afternoon in the chair, that the pregnancy had ended after an accident in the summer. Clai had been driving, had been distracted, and the baby hadn't made it. The doctors had been careful about what they promised regarding future pregnancies. Maya felt the appropriate human grief at this, honestly and briefly, the way she would for anyone. And then she went back to her own life, which had quietly become something she was proud of. What she hadn't anticipated, what she had genuinely stopped preparing for, because she had successfully stopped thinking about all of them, was that Genevieve would one day be parked 2 blocks from Little Roots on a Tuesday afternoon in October, visiting one of her rental properties, and that Finn would come out the front gate with Helen at exactly that moment. Helen called from the car on the way home, Finn chattering in the back seat about something with blocks, and told Maya what had happened, what Genevieve had looked like when she saw him, how she'd gone completely still. "She knows," Helen said quietly. "You could see it on her face clear as anything. She knows." Maya was silent for a moment. Did she try to approach him? She took 1 step toward us. I turned and walked away. Good. Maya pressed her fingers to her eyes. Good. She thought that would be the end of it. 3 days later, the daycare called. Maya made the drive in 11 minutes and found Genevieve standing near the entrance of Little Roots. And when she stopped a few feet away, she felt something she hadn't expected. Not the rage she'd been carrying for 18 months. Something cleaner than that. Sharper. "You told me the baby in my stomach belonged to someone else," she said. "You said that to my face. You and Jasper together in your kitchen, and now you're standing in front of my son's daycare calling yourself his grandmother." "I made a mistake," Genevieve said. Her voice had changed. The precision was still there, but something underneath it had frayed. I know what I did. I know that what I did was. No. Maya's voice was quiet. You didn't make a mistake. You made a decision. And you kept making it. You decided I wasn't good enough for your family. You decided to use photographs of me having lunch with a colleague to destroy my marriage. You decided to let your son throw out his pregnant wife without saying a single word to stop him. And when I was gone, you let him believe his child didn't exist. Maya paused. That's not a mistake. That's who you chose to be. Genevieve's face moved through several things. What settled on it at the end was something Maya hadn't seen there before. He's my grandson, she said, quieter than she'd probably meant. No, Maya said. He's my son, he's mine, and he's Helen's. That's all he is to you. She went inside, spoke with Aaron, asked that Finn not be released to anyone other than herself or Helen, and that Genevieve's name be formally noted as an unauthorized visitor. Aaron wrote it down without asking questions. On her way back through the lobby, Maya passed the window. Genevieve was still standing in the car park, not moving, looking like someone who had finally run a set of calculations she'd been avoiding, and found that the numbers did not add up in her favor. Maya went to get her son. She heard later from the same patient, who seemed to know everything about that neighborhood, that Clai had left Jasper the following month. That there had been significant credit card debt accumulated over the previous 2 years. That a collection of Genevieve's gold jewelry, gifted across birthdays and Christmases, had apparently left with Clai as well. That Jasper and Genevieve were now sharing the Ancaster house, which must have felt very different from how it used to feel. She heard that Jasper had run into Ellis at a pharmacy on Session Street, and that Ellis had told him the truth about that September lunch. The promotion, the conversation, the hand on the shoulder, and that Jasper had stood in the vitamin aisle for a long time after that without saying anything. She heard that he had gone home and confronted his mother. She heard that Genevieve had not exactly denied it. Maya didn't reach out to either of them. She had nothing left to say that she hadn't already said, and the version of herself that had needed something from them had been replaced, slowly and at some cost, by the version who didn't. Jasper's support payments arrived on schedule every month. That was sufficient. On a Thursday evening in November, about 3 weeks after the daycare, Maya stood at the kitchen counter of her apartment on Charlton Avenue and watched Finn sit on the living room floor, arranging and rearranging a set of wooden blocks, with the absorbed seriousness that 2-year-olds bring to things they consider important. Helen was on the couch with her tea and her feet up, giving quiet commentary on his choices. Blue on top of red? Look at that. Good thinking, you. That's a very smart tower. The apartment was small. The walls could have used repainting, and the radiator knocked sometimes in the night. The view was of the building across the street, which was unremarkable. Maya had a good job and steady work, and enough in her account at the end of each month to breathe without calculating. She had her mother on the couch. She had her son on the floor. Outside the window, the first real snow of the season was falling in the quiet, indifferent way Canadian snow falls in November. Not dramatic, not an event, just arriving and covering everything in something clean and even, making the street look temporary and unfamiliar, and somehow more itself. She turned back to the stove and the soup that had been simmering since she got home. And Finn's voice from the other room, asking Helen something she couldn't quite make out, and Helen's answer. Warm and patient and completely ordinary, and she thought about her mother's hands in the hospital, holding hers, and the shape of Finn's face when they first put him on her chest, and the 11-minute drive she would never regret making. She had stopped waiting for an apology. She had stopped wondering what would have been different. The anger was still there sometimes, the way a scar is still there, present, permanent, but no longer the thing you're most aware of when you move through a room. What she had instead was this. Her mother laughing quietly at something Finn was doing with a red block, the smell of the soup, the radiator knocking, familiar now, almost like company. It was enough. She turned down the heat, picked up 2 bowls, and decided, not for the first time but more certainly than before, that it was more than enough.